What's up, you guys? Papa's darlings. Um, I was actually I just finished a counseling session, and I always feel like I need a little bit of time um, to let things go and talk to the Lord about some of the things that I've heard in my counseling sessions, so that I deal with them properly and I don't internalize anything. And so I was getting ready to completely unplug, do as I tell my husband, take time for radio silence. And so I was getting ready to do that, and I popped onto Facebook really quick, just checked my notifications, and I saw a comment that I just suddenly felt like I needed to address it. It was a question that somebody had about something that I posted earlier, and so I just wanted to take the time. Because I am in a bit of a time crunch, this is in no way going to be an exhaustive teaching on this topic. So this is just going to be a little nugget of truth. And I may, at some later date, I may get on here and do a more extensive teaching on this topic. But if you go on my Facebook page, you'll see that I posted a status this morning where I said, are you feeling stuck in despair? There is a way out of there. And I talked about how the key to getting out of despair is to take your eyes off of you and take your attention off of you and turn it outward. And so I just wanted to talk. I wanted to give some practical insight on how to go about doing that. How does one go about taking their attention off of self? We are by nature more self-aware than we are of anything else. We are the most sensitive to our own emotions, more conscious of our own thoughts. Our five senses are constantly giving us input from the environment around us, people in our lives, the news, various things, various sources of input that we receive through our five senses. And so we are, on a day-to-day, I would say all day long basis, we are overwhelmed with input that if we don't make a conscious decision to do something different, will cause us to be very self-focused. It would be very easy for us. You just have to, here's the thing. This, I think, is a really important point, that being self-focused is not a conscious decision you have to make. Have you known somebody who you would describe as being self-absorbed? Now, I'm saying self-focused because the phrase self-absorbed has a really negative connotation. And if I were to tell some of you, you're very self-absorbed, or if somebody in your life were to accuse you of being self-absorbed, that phrase alone would probably have a tendency to make you want to get defensive, walls come up, and you might get aggravated, and you want to push against that and say, I'm not self-absorbed. So, self-focus. We don't want to be self-focused. So I'm using a different phrase intentionally, but just between me and you, self-focused and self-absorbed are exactly the same thing. They're exactly the same thing. So the first thing you need to understand is that some of these people, not you, of course, this would never be true of you, right? But some of the people you know who are self-absorbed, that you would describe them as being self-absorbed. Maybe they annoy you. Maybe it annoys you. Maybe it's your spouse. Maybe it's your boss or your coworker or your best friend that you feel like is self-absorbed, or anybody in your life, you need to understand this, that to be self-absorbed, you don't have to make a conscious decision for that to be the case. You don't have to choose to be self-absorbed. It happens on autopilot. If you just stay on autopilot, if you just coast along and you go with the flow, maintain the status quo, you receive all the input that comes to you from through your five senses, and the thoughts that go through your mind, and the constant trains of thought and outside thoughts that come and bombard your brain, and the feelings that get stirred up as a result of those thoughts, and the emotional reactions that come from words that are spoken to you, that if you just exist, if you just stay on autopilot, you will, without consciously choosing it, you will be a self-focused, aka self-absorbed person. The way to not be self-absorbed, the way to get out of a self-focused existence, which perpetuates misery and despair, is that you have to make a conscious decision. You have to switch out of neutral and into drive. Switch out of neutral and into drive. Because without you making a conscious decision to be something other than self-focused, you will be self-focused. Jesus said, or I say Jesus said, ultimately Jesus said everything in the Bible. The scripture says, I don't know the reference. I'm terrible with scripture references, but the scripture says, set your mind on things above. So the key to training yourself, you're not going to get there overnight. You're not going to get there overnight. You're not going to become a less self-focused person overnight. It's not a quick fix. But you have to start somewhere. And so the first place for you to start is to recognize that you have the option to set your mind. You are not subject to the whimsy, or the unpredictability of your trains of thought. You aren't subject to that. Your mind, your thoughts don't have to rule you. Now, they will. They absolutely will. Your unrenewed, undisciplined mind will, if you let it will absolutely rule you. And it will continue to lead you down a path of the path of least resistance, which is one that allows you to be self-focused or self-absorbed. That's the path of least resistance, and that's the path that an undisciplined mind, an unrenewed mind, your flesh will want to take you every single time. But the good news is that you don't have to be a slave. You aren't a slave. You are not a slave. Not anymore. Before you came to Christ, you were. You had no options. But if you've been joined unto the Lord and you've become one spirit with him, like 1 Corinthians 6:17 says, then you're not a slave anymore. You have union with Christ. You have the mind of Christ right on the inside of you. So you have options now. You can, if the scripture instructs you to set your mind on things above, just like when Jesus says, let not your heart be troubled. There's really good news for us in those scriptures. Within the instruction to set your mind or let not your heart be troubled is the empowering truth that we have the ability to do those things. We are not subject to the whim of our emotions. We are not subject to the whim or the tyranny of an undisciplined mind. We can set our mind. We can let not our heart be troubled. And as a matter of fact, we're the only ones that can do that. Nobody can set your mind for you on things above. Nobody can choose to become focused on something other than self for you. You have to do that. Nobody can let not your heart be troubled for you. Even Jesus can't do that. Jesus can't let not your heart be troubled for you. You have to do that. Darlings of God, you have to do that. And so how? So to answer the question, how do you do that? How do you become less self-focused? If you're feeling like you're stuck in hopelessness and despair, you feel like you're in the bottom of a pit and you can't get out, you just feel stuck there. One of the reasons is because you're so fixated on you. You're fixated. Your mind is set on your emotions. Your mind is set on your negative circumstances. You have allowed your mind to be set on negative things. And so what I'm telling you today is good news for you, that you're not a prisoner. You're not a prisoner and you're not a slave. You can choose to set your mind on something other than you. And that's really all it is. That's how you do it, is when those thoughts come to you, you start paying attention to what you're thinking. That's the first thing. Start paying attention to what you're thinking, especially in the moments when the negative emotions are at a peak and it feels like the claws of despair and hopelessness are trying to pull you even further down. In those particular moments, pay attention to what was my thought pattern? What was the train of thought that took me to this, what train of thought did I ride on that brought me into this moment of despair? Go back in your mind and think about what you were thinking about. And inevitably, can almost guarantee you that the train of thought that brought you into that moment of frenzied negative emotions, of feelings of hopelessness or melancholy or depression or despair are at a peak. It will be a train of thought that was self-focused, where you were meditating mindlessly, mind you. Most of us, we do it. Like I said, we do it on autopilot. If you choose to stay on autopilot, this is what's going to happen. Your trains of thought are going to naturally be self-focused and naturally gravitate to the negativity in your circumstances. But so if you want a different outcome, you have to make different choices. You have to take the reins back from your undisciplined emotions and your undisciplined mind and choose to set your mind in a different direction. Start thinking about what you were thinking about. And then choose to reject, get off of that train. Get off of that train of thought and get onto a different train of thought that has nothing to do with you, that has nothing to do with your circumstances. Set your mind on things above and not on things of the earth. Start thinking about, and there's any number of things that you could set your mind on that would fall under the category of things above, things above. You could start thinking about the goodness of God. I mean, that is a train of thought that's easy to get on. You don't have to think very hard to come. If you've been walking with the Lord for even a short amount of time, it shouldn't take you long to come up with some good examples, some practical, personal examples of the goodness of God. Start thinking about His faithfulness. Start thinking about the people in your life that God has placed there who love you, and how God has been faithful to them. Start thinking about what are their needs? What are the needs of the people that are the closest to me? Is there something that they need from me that maybe I haven't been giving them because I've been so self-focused? Start thinking outside of you. Set your mind on things above. Set your mind outside of you, outside of your negative situations. And essentially what you'll be doing is you will be creating a train of thought that'll take you to a different destination. The negative, the autopilot train of thought is always going to be a self-focused one. And a self-focused train of thought is almost without exception going to take you to a negative place. It's going to take you further into despair. It's going to be like running in a circle. That you're in despair and you're just, here we go loop-de-loo, here we go loop-de-lie, and you just stay on this vicious cycle where the train is just going round and round in this pit of hopelessness and despair and depression. So you got to get on a different train. Get on a different train where that'll take you to a different destination. One that lifts you, one that motivates you to get out of the rut that you may be in and gets you moving and interacting with the outside world and interacting with other people and paying attention to the people in your life and their needs. Hello, hello, desperate one. Hello, sad and broken one. You're not the only person in the world who's hurting. You're not the only person in your life who's hurting. And one of the best things you can do is to start paying attention to the people around you and their needs. Start ministering to them. And as you start doing that, you will notice a change in your internal world. You will start to notice that those feelings of despair will be further and further and further away from you. I promise. I promise. So anyway, it's a conscious decision. How do you do it? You set your mind. Set it. When those negative trains of thought, those self-focused trains of thought, where you mull over and rehearse in your mind your woes and the hopelessness of your life and the disappointments and the rejections and all the negative things, where you stop that madness, you make a different decision. Reject those negative imaginations, those musings, meditations that keep you on a perpetual cycle of despair. So, I pray that helps you. And now I'm going to unplug for just a few minutes before I have to do the next thing that I have scheduled in my day. But I love you guys, and I pray that you experience the love of God today, maybe in a brand new way. Talk to you later.